On behalf of our team, myself, Lonnie Pfeiffer, Mary Rios, and our presenter, our senior attorney, Maria Rarty today, who will talk about SSI eligibility and appeal for children under 18. Before I send it to her way, I just wanted to share a little bit about our agency and the services we offer. Disability Rights was formerly known as Protection and Advocacy. We are a nonprofit organization founded in 1978. We are federally mandated to provide legal services for people with disabilities. Issues we work on can be anything from special education, public benefits, regional center services, housing, employment, and so forth. We have offices in Sacramento, Los Angeles, Bay Area, San Diego, and then our smaller offices are located in Fresno, Ontario, and Modesto. I'll now go ahead and turn it over to Maria. And again, please type in your questions in the chat. We will have time at the end. We'll turn off the recording and you can begin asking your questions. So thank you so much, everyone. And Maria, it's on you.
You're muted, Maria.
Oh, I'm muted. Oh, hold on. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now, yes.
Okay, thank you. So today we're going to talk about the Supplemental Security Income Program, better known as the SSI program. It is a needs-based program, meaning that the income that you have, the resources that you have matter to qualify for this program. I'm going to go through the criteria for eligibility. I'm going to talk about appeals and other things related to the SSI program that I think are really important to know. And so the first criterion that needs to be established for a child I'm just going to say child from now on, child means anyone under the age of 18. I know an 18-year-old would not be considering herself a child, but for purposes of this training, that's what I'm going to do. So we have to establish that the child is disabled. And it's not what the parents think or the child may think. There's a process. There's a definition of disability for a child. And that has to be met. And there's a sequential analysis that's done to determine whether a child is disabled or not. And we're going to go through all of that. Once we're done talking about disability, we're going to talk about income, countable resources. We're going to talk about qualified alien status. And of course, you have to be a California resident to apply for SSI in California. Then I want to talk about responsibilities, mainly reporting responsibilities when certain events happen. Applying, I'll just show you a publication from Social Security about that. I'm going to talk about appeals and representation should the child be denied SSI. So when you submit the application for SSI for your child and any medical records, if there's an IEP, you'd want to submit that. If the child is a regional center client, an IPP, anything that will help with the disability determination. So Social Security does not make disability determinations. It's another entity. It's a state agency called Disability Determination Services, DDS, not to be confused with DDS for Department of Developmental Services. So when I refer to DDS here, it's Disability Determination Services. By the way, you're going to get all of this material, so don't worry so much about, taking notes. So what's going to happen is you submit the application to Social Security. Social Security is going to make sure that the child qualifies as far as countable income, countable resources, qualified alien status if the child is a California resident. Once it's satisfied, it sends the file to DDS. At DDS, it's assigned an analyst, and that analyst is going to make the disability determination. The analyst may also ask that the child be examined by one of their doctors, and that's called a consultative exam. I provided you with all of the DDS offices in California. Why? Because when you determine that the file is at DDS, and you do that by calling Social Security and asking, is it with DDS right now, or has there someone been assigned? And if so, what office? And let's say it's Sacramento, you call that office and you ask to speak to the analyst assigned to your case, to your child's case. Why? Because you want to help the analyst obtain all the information that he or she needs. Because at some point, the analyst is going to have to sit with the file and determine disability. And if the analyst didn't receive the information that the analyst requested from doctors or other people, then the analyst is going to base the decision on what's in the file. So you want to help the analyst get as much information as possible. And so these are all of the offices in California. So this is a publication from Social Security about benefits for children. A child is normally, for purposes of Social Security, a child is normally considered a child until the age of 18. There is an exception when a child may be considered, someone above the age of 18 is considered a child when, for example, that person is still in school. And I think they're here, it says right here. So who is a child is not necessarily until the age of 18. But it's different when we talk about deeming. And I'm going to talk about deeming a little further down the line when we're talking about resources and income. So it's a good publication to look at. Now let's get into the disability determination. What is the definition of disability for a child? You have to show that the disability causes marked and severe functional limitations and that the disability is expected to cause the death of the child or is expected to last at least 12 continuous months. So that is the definition of disability. When that child turns 18 years old, that child will get a letter from Social Security saying, we are going to redetermine your eligibility. We're going to make sure you still continue to be disabled. And they do that. And then they send a letter with the results. We get the calls from parents when the parents say, I just received the Social Security notice saying that my child is no longer disabled. Nothing happened to the disability. It didn't get any better. The only thing that happened is that the child turned 18. I don't understand what happened. Well, what happened is when someone turns 18, now Social Security uses a different definition of disability. And that definition is very different than the child definition because that definition is based on the ability of the person to work and earn this year, if the disability is not based on blindness, $1,550 gross a month. So it's all about work for the adult definition. And I just want to say it, just because you're disabled doesn't mean you can't work. In fact, there are many people who have disabilities who are able to work. So disability doesn't mean inability to work. And so, you know, that the child at age 18 is going to be evaluated under a different definition of disability. And it's possible that Social Security may be right about its decision that your child is no longer disabled or not. But the only way that you're going to know is to appeal, right? Because you can decide to accept the decision or you can decide to appeal. We'll talk about appeals later. So that's why things may change for that child upon turning 18. If the child is applying based on blindness, the definition is the child statutorily blind. It's the same definition for adults, and this is the definition here. So disability is not, it's not what you think. It's whether the child, meets the definition of disability. And there's so these are this is just another publication from Social Security. It's called Disability Evaluation under Social Security, and it gives you the definitions of disability for child and for an adult. And then it talks about the disability determination process, which I'm going to talk about. It talks about the state disability determination services, which I talked about, the evidentiary requirements, and about consultative exams. And so there's a lot of good information, the role of the health professional, what kinds of evidence do you want to submit to show that your child is disabled? And then about consultative exams, who are these doctors that are hired by Social Security to do these exams? So there's a lot of good information here to review. I'm not going to go through every single thing. I'm actually giving you all of this so that when you have time, you can read it at your leisure. Remember, the adult definition of disability is the inability to engage in substantial gainful activity. And what it really means is the inability to work and earn this year, if you're not blind, $1,550. If you're someone who is applying for SSI based on blindness, the amount is $2,590 gross. So it's a higher amount for that. And substantial gainful activity changes every year. And as you can see, it's been going up. So next year, we expect that the substantial gainful activity amount will be greater than it was this year. So those are the numbers now and previously. I want to talk about a concept called presumptive disability. There are some disabilities Social Security says, I think we're going to find these people disabled because of the disability that they have. So let's start giving them the benefit every month, up to 6 months, while we wait for the analyst at DDS to make the disability decision. And let's say that the analyst does in month 4. Will you have to return that money? No. So, and what are those disabilities? So this is the list of presumptive eligibility disabilities. So you can see, for example, allegation of stroke with more than 3 months in the past and continued marked difficulty in walking. I'm not going to read all of them, but you can see what they are. Allegation of Down syndrome, allegation of neurodevelopment impairment. So one of them would be autism spectrum disorder with complete inability to independently perform basic self-care activities, and the applicant has to be at least 4 years old. So if your child's disability is on this list, more likely than not, the child could start getting benefits right away while the analyst does the disability determination. There's another concept called compassionate allowances. Under compassionate allowances, if your disability is listed here, let's say that the child has acute leukemia, so you would click on acute leukemia and see what the criteria is for meeting the list of compassionate allowances. And if that disability meets the list of compassionate allowances for acute leukemia, then for sure they're going to find the child disabled, for sure. And so the process for determining disability is going to be very quick on the part of the analyst. And so this is just an example. There are disabilities from A to Z. And so this is just an example of some of the first, some of the disabilities. I mean, I look at these and I don't recognize 90% of them, right? And if you look at the actual list, there's so many disabilities on that list. So these forms, just the childhood disability report. This one here is a report that you're going to be asked to complete. I was told today that it's no longer available in PDF, but the form is available in a fillable form on the Social Security website. But regardless, I think the form is there in whatever format it is. But it's important just to know about, what information they're going to want regarding your child and the records they're going to want, right? A child's medical records, complete copy of prescriptions or medicine containers. If the child is in special ed, the IEP, or in a regional center consumer, the IPP. And so you can read this, but just to give you an example of the kind of information, of course, they're going to want information on the child, whether you, as the parent filling this out, can speak and understand English. If not, what's your preferred language? About the child. Can the child speak and understand English? More information on the child, who the guardian is, if it's not the parent. And then we get into what are the child's illnesses, injuries, and conditions. Try to be very, very complete about this, right? The more information you give, the better it could be, right? There's more information for the analyst to have. So, and if you run out of room, you know what? You just see attachment, page 1 for more information. And it just goes on to ask, when did the child become disabled? Information about the child's medical records. It's really important when you're giving information on medical providers that you provide the current address, phone number. All of it should be current, because if the analyst needs information from Dr. X, your child's doctor, and they're not going to look it up on Google or try to call the doctor's office to get the address. They're going to look at the information you've provided, and they're going to send that information to that address. So very important that all of this information be complete and accurate and up to date. So for example, here we've got, what hospital clinics the child has gone to. More of that. And if you don't have enough space, just use more paper to do that. What medications, what tests has, any of these tests have they been done? Additional information, etc. So you get the gist. There's a lot of information. Education, information about education. Was the child tested for behavioral or learning problems? Anyway, any work history. Yeah, you can work as a child, because you can work, I don't know, with a work permit, I think 16, 17. So there are children who could have a work history, below the age of 18. So that's going to be information that they're going to want. Any remarks? So there's some space for remarks. Be as thorough as possible. That's important. And then at some point, there's going to be an interview, and they want to make sure that you are prepared for that interview. And you might even receive a letter from Social Security asking for additional information, but this is, a list of the typical information you're going to need to have to take with you at the interview. It's a lot. I mean, there's a lot to do, right? And they provide this worksheet so that you can put that there. Although I think the childhood disability report has a lot of the same information. So just try to have everything together for that interview. At the point where the analyst is ready to determine whether your child is disabled, there's a sequential analysis that happens. And so let me just go back here to what it is. So this is just a another publication from Social Security. And so the sequential analysis for the typical one for adults is a 5-step process. Is the person working at substantial gainful activity? Is the person's condition severe, meaning that it's going to cause the child's death or the adult's death, or lead, or at least last 12 continuous months? Does the disability meet the listing of impairments? And then there are 4 and 5, which has to do with the ability to do the work they do now or other work. When we're talking about children, the sequential analysis is, they're going to ask if the child has any work activity, because children under the age of 18, some of them work, right? And they'll have work activity. The question will also be, is the child's condition severe? And then does the child condition meet the listing of impairments, or does the child's, if not, then does the child's condition, is the condition functionally equivalent to the listing of impairments? And so this is the sequential analysis that happens. So if the child is working substantial gainful activity, guess what's going to happen? So the analyst is going to say the child is working substantial gainful activity, not disabled. If the child's condition is not severe, meaning it's not going to last 12 continuous months at least, or result in the child's death, not severe. If it doesn't meet the listing of impairments, well, does the disability, is it functionally equivalent to the listing of impairments? And I'll talk about that a little more. So that's the sequential analysis that happens for children. But on that third question of whether the child meets the listing of impairments, it comes from what's called the Blue Book. The listing of impairments are located in the Blue Book. I'm sorry, it's just, this is where the Blue Book is in this training thing. But so if you go online, you're going to find in the Blue Book, you're going to find the listing of impairments for adults and the listing of impairments for children. This one happens to be a listing of impairment for adults, but it's the same format for kids. And so let's say that your child has a digestive disorder or disability. You would check, or the analyst would go to Section 5, Digestive System, and look to see if your child's disability is there and whether your child's disability meets the listing of impairments for that disability. It's there in the listing of impairments. But if your child's disability or disabilities don't meet the listing of impairments in the Blue Book, then the analyst looks to see whether the disabilities are functionally equivalent to the Blue Book listing. And so Social Security put together this publication for healthcare professionals. And so it talks about, it talks about the definition of disability for a child. Interesting too, what kinds of medical evidence are acceptable medical sources. So as you see here, licensed healthcare professionals, qualified speech language pathologist, et cetera, et cetera. And the role of the physician or the healthcare professional. And then what happens is that the analyst is going to look at domains to see if the disability is functionally equivalent to the Blue Book listing. So, for example, the first domain is the child's ability to acquire and use information. Second one, the child's ability to attend and complete tasks. Third, how does the child interact and relate to others? Fourth, what are the fine and gross motor skills of the child? How does the child care for him or herself? And the last category is a health and physical well-being category. So they consider the cumulative effects, physical effects of the physical or mental impairments and their associated treatments or therapies on the child's functioning. So what's the moral of this story? The moral of this story is that when you submit the application for SSI, make sure that there's documentation that addresses these domains in case your child's disability doesn't meet the listing of impairments. Because if there's not information in the analyst's file, the analyst will try to get the information from the people you've listed in the documents that you've provided. But who's to say that those people who got the letter from the analyst are even going to respond or going to provide enough information to make it meaningful? So that's why I say you need to get a hold of the analyst and try to help the analyst get all of the information that the analyst needs. So when the analyst is ready to make that determination, the analyst has everything in front of him or her. And make sure that you have documentation that addresses each domain. So that's the Blue Book listing of impairments. So now we're done with discussing disability. Now we're going to talk about countable income. Note, we don't say gross income, we say countable income because Social Security is not interested in gross income. They're only interested in countable income. And what is countable income? SSI will allow you to deduct certain things from earned income, unearned income to get to countable income. And once you have your countable income, you compare that to the amount of SSI the child would get every month. And if the countable income is above that amount, then the child is not eligible for SSI because the child is over income for the program. The same concept for resources. And I'm going to talk about deeming because it applies to minors. But let's talk about what income is. But let me talk about deeming first because it'll make sense. When a minor is applying for SSI, the income and resources of the child, the parent with whom the child lives, is going to be deemed to the child, meaning SSI is going to pretend that money and resource is the child's. And so what can that do? It can either make the child ineligible for SSI or reduce the SSI amount. That's called deeming. There is no exception. There is in Medi-Cal, but there isn't here. So you have children who would be found disabled under the analysis, but are not getting SSI because either the parents are over-resourced or over-income for the program. So what happens is that at the age of 18, deeming no longer applies. And so what these kids normally do is they can't get SSI while they're below the age of 18, but upon turning 18, they now can apply for SSI and the parents' income and resources don't matter anymore. Another type, so earned income, the child can have earned income. Now, the parents earned it, the parents' income is going to be considered. And if the child has any income, that income will be considered. Because the children can have their own income from, for example, child support. The program counts 2/3 of the child support as the child's income. So when we're talking about minors, they're looking at the parents' income and they're also going to look at the minor's income. Unearned income, if the parent is earning, getting other Social Security benefits, pensions, getting dividends from investments, cash from people, unemployment benefits, state disability payments, those are all forms of unearned income that will be deemed to the child. If the child has his or her own unearned income, then that's income that's considered. In-kind income is not important for children. It's important for adults. So I'm not going to go over that, but if you want to know more about in-kind income, there's a really great publication from Justice and Aging, and either Lonnie or Mary will put the link to that publication. And then deeming, we've been talking about deeming. For kids, it's, the parents. Deeming also applies to spouses. So if I'm married and I want to apply for SSI, my spouse's income and resources will be deemed to me, or if I was sponsored to become a lawful permanent resident, my sponsor's income and resources can be deemed to me too. Excuse me. So remember I said in the beginning, when we started talking about income, is that countable income. It's not gross income. So they take gross income and they deduct certain things. So for unearned income, you add up all your unearned income and you deduct $20 from that. And the result is your countable unearned income. If the parent is working, then they get the gross income, deduct $65. And if there's no unearned income, then you can deduct the $20, divide that by 2, and that becomes countable income. There are other deductions to gross income for work, but basically these are the deductions that are made to get to countable income. And there are other things that are just not counted as income. So for example, CalFresh, income tax refunds, loans. If the parent has the loan and has to repay it, that's not going to be considered income. These are just examples of things that are not considered income. It's not the whole list of things. The SSI program is a complicated program. Sometimes the answer is hard to find, and sometimes there's an exception to something or an exception to an exception. So, you have to really be careful with this program, because if you don't know the rules, you could, end up with an overpayment, end up having it suspended or terminated. It's really important to understand. And if you're not quite sure about something, reach out to us, reach out to other organizations who do Social Security work, make an appointment with the Social Security representative, reach out to your U.S. congressperson in your district. They are there to help you with any problems you're having with a federal agency. And the Social Security Administration is a federal agency. So, if you're having trouble with Social Security, reach out to them. They're there to help. So that's income. And there's more information here on deeming. Okay, sorry about that. So now let's talk about countable resources. Again, not every resource you have is going to be counted for SSI eligibility, but let's just talk about what resources generally are: cash, land, real property, personal property, deemed resources, life insurance. These are just examples of income. But, and remember, for minors, the resources of the parents are deemed to the minor. And the minor may have his or her own resources. And so so for a minor, and it's not here, and yes, so for deemed resources, if the child is living with both parents, then the resource limit is $5,000. If the child is living with only one parent, then the resource limit is $4,000. For an adult, it's different, but this is how much of resources there can be for a minor. and it's not a lot. So, you know, and as a parent, you have to worry about this because you're accountable resources under these limits. Because if you don't, and you don't, you know, and you're now over resourced, and Social Security gets wind of it, you could end up with an overpayment for you for money they paid for years. I mean, I remember, and this didn't have to do with a minor, but a client who she didn't understand the program, and she thought she could save money. She didn't want to use all her SSI, so she started saving money in her bank account. And the general rule is that SS income is considered, money is considered income in the month received, and anything that's left over that goes into the following month converts into a resource. Okay, so this lady was saving money, and the first month it was counted as income to her, which would affect her SSI amount, or either she would not get any for that month, or she would get, you know, a portion of what she normally would get. So, and then after that, when she started to save up following month, it became a resource. And she didn't really report it, and Social Security didn't get wind of it until 5 years later. And so she gets a notice of action saying, we're going to suspend your SSI because you've been over resourced for the last 5 years. At some point in time, they'll find out that information. And so what happened? She had an overpayment where she had to pay back 5 years worth of SSI benefits. All she wanted to do was save some money, right? But this program really doesn't allow you to do that. The only way to really do it is to open up a CalAble account, where if you're on SSI, and it could be for a minor too, when if you're on SSI and the minor is eligible for a CalAble account, the minor can have up to $100,000 in the CalAble account, this one here, and it will not affect the minor's eligibility for SSI or the Medi-Cal that comes with the SSI. So there are things that don't count as resources. So the home the parents own and live in is not considered a resource. One vehicle is not considered a resource. These are just examples of things that are not considered resources, but it's not an exhaustive list. There are many things that are not considered resources, and there are many things that are. And going back to the rule of income in the month it's received, money's received, and resources, and it becomes a resource the following month. Some people receive lump sum payments like a retroactive IHSS payment or an SSI payment. You're given more time to spend down that resource before it to spend out that income before it becomes a resource. So for SSI retroactive awards, you're given 9 months to spend that down before it's considered a resource. And we have a publication on lump sum payments for SSI recipients that we'll put the link in the chat. Other things that don't count. Here I was talking about retro SSI or other Social Security benefits. They don't count as a resource for 9 months, but you got to spend it down. If you have a CalAble account, you might be able to put some of that money in there and not have to spend it down. If you want to sell a resource, be careful. Don't give it away. Don't sell it for less than market value because you're going to be dinged for that. If you buy a resource, you've got to let Social Security know, because that resource may affect eligibility. So it's a tricky thing for sure. So now we've talked about disability, we've talked about income, resources. Now let's talk about qualified alien status to apply for SSI. There are 7 categories. I'm not an immigration attorney, but here they are. I do want to say about lawful permanent residents for the first 5 years after you become a lawful permanent resident, you cannot apply for SSI. But there's a program in California called CAPI, and you might be eligible for CAPI. It gives the same money benefit as the SSI program. I do a training on CAPI if you guys are interested. But anyway, these are the categories of people who are qualified aliens to be able to apply for SSI. This publication also talks about other special categories of people, including people who are victims of severe forms of human trafficking, Iraqi and Afghan special immigrants, humanitarian parolee, and Ukrainian humanitarian parolees. So there are special programs for peoples. So we have covered the criteria, very basic on eligibility for SSI. I want to show you a publication from the Social Security Administration about your rights, but you can read about your rights. I'm more interested in you understanding as parents the responsibilities. It's reporting responsibilities. You know, if the child is getting SSI and then starts working, you've got to report that, because now that's income to the child that's going to affect the SSI. You know, if you as a parent divorce, then and the other parent's not in the house anymore, then that spouse's income and resources don't matter anymore. So these are all the kinds of reporting response. Some of them may apply to the minor, some of them may not. If there's a change in school attendance, if there's a change in immigration status, if the child leaves the U.S., you can't be out of the U.S. for more than 30 continuous days for the SSI program. But you've got to let SSI know that you're gone or that the child is going. So lots of reporting responsibilities. And when your child gets on SSI and receives that letter, there's information about reporting responsibilities that you should look at, because, like I said, if you don't report things that you should have reported, it could mean suspension, termination, it could mean an overpayment, and it could mean a fraud investigation. So really important to report. So the way to apply, you can apply online. If you need a reasonable accommodation, you can call Social Security and they can provide that. You can have someone from Social Security call you and go through the application with you. You can download the application. You can do it online, different ways to do it. And this is their publication on how to do that. Appeals. So you get a letter saying that your son or daughter are not eligible for SSI, and it must give you the reasons. If the reason is that too much income, too much in resources, you know, not the right qualified alien status, you can appeal that, you know, and that first level of appeal is called a reconsideration. Also, if you are denied, if your child is denied SSI because they find that the child is not disabled, you can also file for a reconsideration. So what happens on a disability denial? If you file for a reconsideration, someone else at DDS, another analyst, will review the file to see if the analyst who made the decision was correct or not. If the reason was related to countable income, resources, qualified alien status, and you file for reconsideration, someone else at Social Security will review the file to determine whether that Social Security rep who made the decision was correct or not. If you lose at the reconsideration level, your next level of appeal is a hearing before an administrative law judge. If you lose there, your next level of appeal is before the appeals council. And if you lose there, federal court. Believe me, you don't want to go anywhere near here if you don't have to. So my best advice is to be prepared with the application. Make sure you've got all the documents. Make sure the documents that you submit are consistent factually. You don't want to submit documents that say one thing about the matter and another document says something different about the same matter, because you're submitting conflicting facts. So what I'm saying is, don't just gather up everything you think that they're going to need without reading what you're going to submit and making sure that everything is factually correct, that all of the documents you're submitting are consistent factually. Really important. And this publication talks about, it's a great publication about the appeals process, how much time you have to submit, what form you need. So it talks about all the levels of appeal, which you could go through. Let's talk about representation. Let's say that the child is denied SSI, and you appeal and you want someone to help you at the hearing. If you can find someone to help you at the hearing, yes, you can. It could be an attorney or it could be a non-attorney. Non-attorneys can represent you at these hearings. But the way that they get paid is their fees are based on their wins. So they will only get a fee for representing your child, for example, if they win the case. And so if you're going out there looking for someone to represent your child, you got to sell the case to that person. Because if I'm doing this for a living, and the only way I'm going to be making my fee or fees is if I win the cases, I'm really going to want to work only on the good cases, the cases I think I'm going to win. These people who do this work usually will give you a free consultation. If you want to review your case with someone like that, I think it's a great idea. Take all your paperwork. They'll review the file and let you know. If they think it's a good case, they're going to want it. If they don't think it's a good case, they're not going to want it. And if they don't want it, you ought to know why they don't want it, right? You want to know if it's something that can be remediated or if it's something that's not possibly, you can't change the facts, right? And get a second opinion from someone else too, to see if you're not quite sure that the first person who told you the case was not good, if you don't really, believe the person or you just want a second opinion, go ahead and do that. The way they get paid is through winning the case, and the fee that they get is the lesser of 25% of past due benefits or retroactive benefits, because by the time you get to a hearing, a lot of time could have passed by. So you're going to get a nice chunk of change as a retroactive benefit, so it's the lesser of 25% of the past due benefits or $7,200, whichever is less. And so there's more information about that. I've included helpful suggestions. You can read them, but the one that I want you to remember is, if you're ever having any problems with the Social Security Administration, you can contact your U.S. Congressperson, and all you have to do is go to, I think, did we put the link? Let me just make sure. I just want to see if we have the link to. No, we don't, but let me show you how to find your U.S. Congressperson. What you do is, I'm going to just go to Google and I'm going to put find my U.S. representative. Find your representative. I'm going to put a zip code. Let's do 92116. Find my rep. Oh boy, it says possibly one of three of these. So it's asking me for my full address, but let's say that my representative is Sarah Jacobs based on my complete address. I go to her website, I go to menu, and she's got helping you with a federal agency. And so she talks about how she can help you, for example, with the Social Security Administration. It is a federal agency. And if you want help, what they can and can't do, you have to fill out an authorization form. They need consent from you so that Social Security can release information to them. And they're going to want, obviously, the facts of your issue and that kind of thing. So she's got a form in English and Spanish. So that's the way you reach out to your U.S. Congressperson. So we're at the end of the presentation. Happy to take any questions.
Are we